AI happens pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, it might just pass you by.
Hello, and welcome to The Reasoning Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely, and today I have reason to believe that there are going to be plenty of people that are going to decide to make an AI tool or a set of AI capabilities the center of their work life. Call it the Claude-life, if you will, or if you will, sort of jokingly, we'll call this show the Claude-cast. We are going to dig into that right after the break. Today's show is brought to you by VENTION. AI promises speed, but for many teams, it means more meetings, more tools, more confusion, and still not much to show at launch. VENTION works differently. AI is embedded in their processes from the first architecture decision through deployment. Their engineers use AI to cut repetitive work and focus on what matters most, building the right product faster. This is their peace of mind promise. You get clear ownership, full visibility into progress, and delivery that you can rely on. Ready for an expert developer who actually delivers? Visit VentionTeams.com. And we're back, and today I am joined by somebody that most of you know, if you've been listening to the show at all, Brandon Whichard, CEO of Failover Media and Software Defined Talk. Brandon, welcome back to the show. Today we are not going to do Cloud News of the Month, but we're going to do something that's much more near and dear to your heart. But how are you, man? How you been?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm counting this as my first appearance on The Reasoning Show. We've left the Claude-cast. Can't even talk anymore. Behind, and so I'm excited that we're switching topics a little bit. And You're right, AI is near and dear to my heart right now, as it is probably to everyone listening.
Yeah, and I mean this actual show, we may just call it the Claude-cast, because you have been living sort of the self-proclaimed Claude-centric life, the Claude-life. You made a decision, I don't know, some number of months ago. You've been experimenting, you've been out dabbling, you've been dating around the AI scene. You are now all in on Claude, and I wanted to sort of dig into what is the Claude-life, right? How's it going and so forth. But so give us a little bit of background. How long you've been living the Claude-life? When did it dawn on you to sort of truly make this the center of your day-to-day activities?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably like a lot of people listening, it's like, I've been using the chatbots for a long, long time. And then, of course, everyone heard about Claude or, the various AI agents you can download. And I, for a while, I was like everyone else. I just sort of was like, I don't code day to day. I'm not really sure what I would do with it. And just kind of like looked on curiously, but didn't do much about it. But I'm like, I bet you many people listening, like everyone has like a little side project, a little programming project, something that maybe has been sitting on their computer for a while and something they want to work on. So I had a couple of those projects, and I was like, they just kind of left them. Nothing was happening. I certain got away from it. I was like, well, let me just like crank up one of these agents and just see what happens. I'm just going to point it at like what the code I have and the ideas I have and see if it can kind of, if you will, bring these to life again. And sure enough, like that's where the light bulb really went off for me, right? I did that. And stuff that I had struggled with for months or years, to the point I've kind of given up on, like suddenly I can make progress in a matter of minutes. Things that would have taken me like days, maybe weeks to figure out. I could basically, if you will, take my ideas, things that I had sort of been interested in. Some of these are very small things. These are like personal scripts that I'm using for my own little work life, automation. Some of these are like, just let's call them very high risk ideas. But I've always wondered like what it would look like if I could get something like kind of built out. And that was sort of the moment of like, whoa, this is incredible, right? That's where I think I had the light bulb go off. And then I think the biggest thing, and I've said this multiple times, maybe on this podcast as well, is like, you're only limited by the questions you ask. It was just like, and that's where I've kind of gone, where it's like, well, what if I just started asking it to do like everything I'm trying to do? Yeah. Write emails, draft proposals, do presentations, do market research. Everybody I think I know has gone through this phase of like, what if I created a daily report on the sources I like? And it's sort of like has really opened the door to like where I think so many other people are at this point. It's like, no, Claude is like, you can use it for literally everything. And the fact that it's named Claude Code is somewhat limiting. And I tell this to people all the time. It's like, you just have to be generally familiar with the terminal, but only a little bit, just enough to type in the word Claude and be willing to just start asking it questions. Yeah. So I don't know. That's been my journey. I know you've been playing with it. I mean, what has your experience been?
Yeah, no, I think I was sort of a little bit of the same with you. I was using a bunch of different tools. I think for the most part, I was using them primarily for sort of research stuff. I don't want to say like replacing Google searches and stuff, but, going and saying, hey, I have to write this thing. I have to create this thing. This is my scenario. What do you think? So it was a lot of sort of brainstorming stuff and so forth. And yeah, I had a couple of things at work in which the folks I was working on, I don't know, I either had a short deadline or they had done some stuff. And I was just like, all right, I'm just going to kind of go from this point forward. I'm just going to kind of go all in doing stuff within Claude. And, we could have picked something else, but Claude right now at least feels like significantly better than some of the others. And I think part of it is
consensus for sure.
Part of it, I think, is just because like they seem to have been very focused on like, I'm going to help you with work stuff. Just, I'm going to help you do work. And I've kind of come around to this idea that, you just mentioned it and it kind of dawned on me. So like a ChatGPT, you think of it and you're like, oh, I chat with it, right? I do some sort of interactive, but it's sort of a chatting, it's a chat bot. Claude Code, like you said in your mind, you're like, oh, this is for coding. Maybe I'm not a full-time developer. Maybe it's not for me. And I kind of have this mindset now where I'm like, most anybody that I interact with, unless it's, literally just like, the guy who's, doing, he's a plumber or something like that, but even maybe not. But I'm like, you could break down most jobs into saying like, there is a component of what you do that interacts with software. You don't even have to write software, but it interacts with software. It could be, again, something's getting written on a thing in software. It's interacting with a system. And I'm like, when that light bulb went off for me, I was like, this thing should be the center of everything that I do because its job is to make interacting with software easier. And my thing that I do at work, again, whether it's for the podcast or is like interacting with software. Doesn't have to be a developer, but it's interacting with systems and software and people via software. And that was sort of the light bulb moment for me to be like, okay, make this the center of what you do and everything else should be an exception as to, not starting there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the biggest limitation I see why people get into it because the coding is like not like, if you will, being willing to ask it to do like the higher level thing. So for example, it may be like, hey, could you like just like the thing we classically say, could you just like parse the CSV and find this information for me? And it's like, but what you're really trying to do is like, tell me who all my competitors are, or like, or you're just sort of like, you have a big file of data. You're like, I'm trying to figure out like what's interesting in here. And it's like, if you start to, and this is the part that gets really, I don't know, I feel like the light bulb's always going off. It's like, no, just ask it for what you want. It's like what we used to say all the time in IT, right? We used to say something to the effect of like, you'd be with some business leaders or like you'd be in some meeting, people are like, guys, we need to think about the business objective. What is the business objective of this specific thing? What are we trying to get out of it? And it's almost like take that mindset and do it for yourself. Just be like, I work in this job. I do this. I'm trying to do X. Can you help me? And let it kind of tell you what it can do. And that starts to frame it versus like trying to optimize like, oh, I just want to make this Excel spreadsheet better every single week. It's like, you probably don't even need the Excel spreadsheet when it's all said and done. You can probably ask Claude just to be like, create me a report every week that shows whatever, our increase in sales and post it to this area so everyone can see it. And it'll just tell you. And then if it has questions, it'll just tell you, it's like, well, I need help with this. Like, where can I post it? Give me permissions. And you're like, and sure enough, you look like a genius. Then after a while, you're like, first you feel like you're a genius. And then the second part is like, oh, I should have been doing this all along. Why was I wasting all this time doing this like task that was kind of pointless to do?
Yeah. Now, what I'm hoping to do with this podcast is not just be two guys who are like, yeah, I really like using these tools. That's cool. You should do that. Like, that starts to, sound like, I mean, we could replace that with, hey, you should do Pilates every week, or hey, you should change your diet. Like, what I kind of want to do is, because you've been very Claude-centric, I want to dive into that specific tool, because we may end up, as you mentioned, we may do some stuff with Sally O'Malley where we even dive into OpenClaw or whatever else comes next. So let's start with this. So what have you found sort of biggest hurdles you had to overcome? Because one of the things I hear from a lot of people is like, well, yeah, I would, but I don't know if I trust it. I don't know if it's right or all that. But now that we're starting to get into Claude being able to interact with sort of external systems that could be, as you mentioned, anything. It could be a reporting system. It could be create something. It could be it could be your email. It could be, a financial transactions. Like, what were the biggest hurdles you had to overcome before you trusted the system, or how have you been kind of going through that? Like, okay, I'm going to trust it to do this next thing, right? Because like, even if you just said like, hey, let it write an email for me or send an email, that may spook some folks. But like, how did you kind of get over that trust versus ownership thing?
Yeah, well, for me, I think it's like, first you make it kind of an assistive technology where you're sort of like asking it to do things, but you're looking at everything along the way. And then over time, right, you get more confidence and you start to kind of let it do stuff on your own. And I think the way that I kind of do projects now is, I mean, this is maybe too detailed, but let's just like say it's like everything that I kind of consider like a project, whatever, however you define that, right? Like this is the thing I work on. I create a folder on my Mac and I put everything related to that project in there, right? Yeah. And the first thing I will do is I will literally go in there and start Claude, run a init, right? And let it read through everything. Because that's the first thing. It's like you're basically grounding it. And I don't think we need to even get into all the details of like RAG or whatever else, but you're basically saying like, read everything in here, right? And then, because once you kind of like, because that really grounds it really very, very well. I find that like, I don't think it like if you're telling I'm like working on like whatever, I'm working on building a little Go program that's going to like help me like automate a podcast task or something simple, right? Or automate just the generating report. I have never seen it go off and be like, it's like starting to insert Disney characters or anything like that. You know, it's like, I just don't see that kind of weird hallucination. It's sort of like you give it that information and then that's what really starts to contain it. And then for me, I always start with like, you know, making it assist me. So it's not send an email. It's first it was, well, I'll just type in an email, have it proofread it. Yeah. And that worked well enough. But then I was like, okay, well, like, why am I writing this email? Then I would just say, write an email, and then I'd give some context, and it would draft the whole email. And then I would cut and paste it. And I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But then I'm like, that's annoying. I have to cut and paste, and the formatting gets wrong. So then I hooked it up to like my Gmail, and I was just like, draft the email, write it up, and when you're finished, put it in the drafts folder, right? And then it gives you a nice, beautiful, you know, formatted email that all you have to do is click send. And then, of course, like I sit there with the draft, I'll just go back and forth. I'll read it. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's better. But I just find like, you know, just the simple notion of going through and, you know, the drafting process, like I feel like I write much more concise emails. That's the number one thing I think people benefit from. And two, I don't have to keep doing like all these little things like cut and paste or cutting, pasting between. Man, I was like, this is incredibly annoying. This is amazing how long this takes. And then you get to the point, and then now, like if I do have to send out some emails that go to like a large group that are pretty much standard, like I am now at a point like, that's like set and forget. It's just like, send it to everyone. Here's the weekly status report. Here's the newsletter. Here's, you know, all these things you have to do. And it's sort of like, but I did that only because I walked through the whole process and I'm very comfortable with what it did. And then, you know, part of it too is just sort of like, as you see it more and you start to see it, it's not like human beings don't make mistakes, right? It's sort of like, I don't know. I feel like if you will, it would be different maybe if I was sending an email to like 1 million people. Like, okay, maybe that would be like, we got to really have all hands on decks. But a lot of the stuff, it's like, I think if it were to make a mistake, it would be pretty minor, right? So I've kind of contained things that way. So, and I think, you know, maybe the coding side of that is the whole, you know, pull requests thing, right? This is the thing everyone talks about. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can review every line of code if you want. I mean, but it's going to take you a while to do that. And for the most part, after you've kind of gotten a sense of like, here's how it writes loops, here's how it writes functions, here's how it writes methods, it's like, you get pretty comfortable with that. Like, I think that's where like the software development team is working for. And then you can get to the point where it's like, you can tell it, you can, if you will, have it analyze itself. It's like, tell me what I need to look at on this specific email, or ask it, just ask it. Like, do you have any questions? Do you see anything that's wrong with the thing we're working on? Because it's amazing what it will surface. So all of those things together is sort of like, if you will, assistive technology at the beginning, actually having it audit itself, and then just practice has made me very confident in what it's actually using or what it's actually doing. Yeah.
As you were talking about that, the thing that jumped to mind was I sort of have this mindset now that I've adopted, which is like, never start, like if I'm interacting with it, I never start with a sort of essentially a blank sheet of paper. Like I'm always, you know, and this is, I think, what you were getting at, which is like always grounded in something. And so, you know, I think when I first started doing stuff with, I don't know, whatever AI tool it was, I was always like, okay, now we're starting and we're going to do this thing. And this is what I want to do. And the more I've kind of thought about it, the more I'm like, somebody's already done, I don't know, 99.9% of whatever I'm going to go do. And they've probably done it really well. Maybe it's not the exact same context or whatever, but I can go grab stuff that, it's just like anything. Like you get inspired by something or you're like, oh, that's really good. Or, oh, I like that concept of it. And so I'll just go start pulling stuff that other people have done, and again, you could argue like, oh, well, that's kind of cheating or stealing. It's like, you do that today with what you do. Like, if you wanted to look at a presentation and you were like, man, I was in this keynote the other day and they did this cool thing with graphics. Like, I mean, you're borrowing an idea, and people have been borrowing ideas for thousands of years. But like, yeah, I found that as soon as I stopped starting with a blank sheet of paper, I started with something that it could look at, or at least load up into its memory, sort of have for reference. And then I could start bouncing ideas, even off just be like, look at that thing. I want something like that. And I'm going to kind of do something like this. What do you think of this? It moves it so much faster. And then what it does is it forces you to start being like, well, this is how I would question somebody if they were, doing something around my house. Like, oh, hey, I want to redesign the house. Like, you're not just going to be like, how would I you'd be like, I came with 25 ideas and I have a bunch of questions. And, I think that's the next big step is you got to give it enough stuff to where you feel like you're like, okay, we're rocking and rolling. Because the thing is, once you start doing stuff like, and you've mentioned this before, like you get into a flow. Like you're just like, oh man, okay, all right, how do I make this a little better? Okay, oh cool, like I got this output, cool. Let's see if I can, do this. But if you're constantly starting from scratch, then yeah, you're not always sure if like the first thing is any good. And I think that's a huge kind of getting over the hump thing.
Well, and I think what you said there too is like, I have gotten to the point that like, I think of like Claude as really helping me with the cold start problem. Because a lot of times, like you may think to yourself, like, I need to write an email, I need to write a white paper, I'm working on something that's kind of long or big, but I'm procrastinating. I don't want to start it. I'm going to walk the dog. I'm going to do all these other things. And it's like, what I find though is like, I open up a Claude, put everything in there and just start. I just will start to be like, I think I need to write a paper. I need to write 2,000 words on this. And then I will just like literally type in like 500 words, no editing, bad grammar, misspellings. And I will just like throw it all in there, right? It's awful, right? And then and the Claude will go through and it'll look at that. And then it will start to come back with me with another draft, right? And then, of course, that draft starts to click in my mind.
Right.
What I'll find is like, oh, that wasn't right. But then now I'm moving, we're making progress. And I think the same thing, I saw someone say like on some product management groups, someone's like, if you as a product manager, what have you built? And that's another great example of like, don't like write the requirements, like just build the thing or build some version of it, right? Because you start walking into the people and be like, here's what I think it should do, and here's a prototype. Or like, here's like a pretty well drafted thing I've been working on for 2 hours. That probably would have taken me 3 weeks if I was by myself, right?
Right.
And then the idea too, it's like, I love to make it to go from like editor, like grammatical editor to story editor. It's always like, because like a lot of times I'll get something to like, I think it's pretty good, right? But then I'll almost ask it more like a story editor or something like what's not good in here? Like, have we lost it, right? And I think one of the things like editors always talk about is like, you buried the lead. And like, why is that such a cliche? Because human nature is like the act of writing. It takes a while for you to almost figure out what your lead is. And then you think it's really good. But like, you have all that history and it's like 3 paragraphs down. And it goes right in and says, this is your point, move this up. And you read it, you're like, oh man, that's obvious. Like, why didn't I do that? And then, so it's like, so to me, it's like, I don't know, the whole idea about like, people always talk about slop. And I'm like, if it's your ideas and your original thoughts or your opinions, it's like having something kind of amplify that for you and help you get through that creation phase is incredibly valuable. And that's probably the most valuable thing I've used it for.
Yeah. And I think the thing you pointed out where you're like, sometimes I just start writing stuff down, but I'm not thinking about the formatting of it. It might not be the best grammar. It might just be fragmented. I found I do that as well, where I'm like, okay, this is part of the not starting with a blank sheet of paper. You're also, in most cases, not starting with like I haven't thought about this at all. You might have thought about it while you're walking the dog or you're in the shower or you'd sat at work and listened to some meetings or whatever. Usually you'd be surprised if you've got a lot of stuff in your head. If you just start putting it down, and again, your natural inclination is to be like, well, I'm going to share this with somebody, so I got to format it. I got to really structure it, because they just start putting like it just blah. Yeah, just let it kind of come out, and then go like the one thing I do all the time is I'll take some big thing that I have and go, okay, hey Claude, now take all this stuff and then write me a prompt that would be what this is, and then it'll and then it puts it into something that's formatted, and like you'll start looking at it and you're like, oh yeah, actually, I kind of had some good ways of laying this out, but I didn't, it didn't dawn on you at the times. Yeah, I think that those two things are super, super, super important, especially if you feel like you said, you're like, oh, I don't really want to get started, or God, how long is this going to take? Like, it really does happen faster than you think,
like,
just with your natural inclinations.
Yeah, give people the permission to just like, listen, there are a few people that can literally sit down and write in one sitting perfect prose. There are a few people I've heard, okay. No. The vast majority are not those people, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's like just giving yourself permission to be like, type in the first 500 to 1,000 words on anything that you're thinking. Yeah. And get that honestly will jumpstart. And I think that tip alone, I think will jumpstart so many more projects and things that you have to do in your life. Yep. It doesn't have to just be, like somebody we're talking about over on our podcast, like something very boring. Like it's tax season here in the United States. And it was like one of my co-hosts, like, what do you have to do in your tax season? Get all this stuff together and fill out like an accountant form or get it ready for like TurboTax or something. And it's like, yeah, that's a great Claude task. Like, read through all this stuff. What is everything? Like, figure out what it means. It's like, that gets you over the hump of like, I'll just wait till April 15th and file an extension. It's like, no, just get going with it. Yep.
So next thing I wanted to dig into, what are some of your best practices? Like, how do you set up your machine? And again, this is going to get a little bit into like, how much of all the capabilities are you using with Claude? Because there's now, Claude Chat, Claude Work, Claude Code, giving it access to things. So like, what are some of the things you found best practice-wise to like how you set up your environment so that, it's got access to the right kind of data or external systems, maybe through an MCP server? But like, what are some of the things you found that just make things, easier? You can wrap your head around it and you can just start doing work.
Yeah, my take on it is like, I've played with mostly with Claude Code, but a little bit with Co-work. I just think you kind of have to pick the UI you're more comfortable with. I would gravitate towards actually just using the terminal, and I'll just, one little free plug here for the terminal I like is Ghost TTY. Super nice. It's just a nice viewing experience. And like what I do is just as simple before. It's like I will literally have, right now I'm looking at, I have tabs open for every major project I'm working on. I've got a Claude session going for each one of them. And like I said before, what do? I take everything for that specific folder and I put it in there. And that's like step one. And then I have started to connecting because I've gotten a lot more, I guess, confident whether it would be the right thing is I have connected it to like my email as well as my Google Drive, as well as it has like, it will mostly prompt me for different access, but I've kind of gotten that kind of figured out where it's like, well, if I just put most of the files in the folder, it's working, it's fine to do that as well. So that's sort of like, to me, like step one. And then the other thing that I do for all of the ones that I've started is like, I do create like a Claude MD file. And when I say Claude creates it with some level of overview of the project that I'm specifically working on, right? So that's sort of, if you will, gives Claude some context of like, this is what we're working on here. This is what all these files are. And then I start to actually use that to, if you will, kind of, as we go along, I have it update itself. Like, okay, where are we at with this project? What was the last thing to do? Yeah. And then, this is funny for me to say, I have long since gotten away from using all type of source control. Like I was just like, I don't really want to learn GitHub. I don't like really care. But I will say I love GitHub now because everything now, because I don't really interact with it. I just tell it at the first time. I'll be like, create a project, create a repo for this, put everything in there. And I just use that for source control. Not so much that like I interact with GitHub, but it's just like, oh, I've got everything there. So even for like, if you will, quote unquote, coding projects, that's a really simple thing too. And again, like I'm someone that never liked GitHub. That was always like, this is too complicated. But like the fact that like Claude can just do all the commands, that's a perfect interface for me. It's like, I don't even care really where it is. So that's sort of like the basic stuff that I think pretty much everyone should be able to do it. Now, there's some other stuff as you get more into it because the more you use it, the more you'll learn like, oh, these tokens are going pretty fast. So there's some optimizations you can do around like, we don't have time for this today, but like MCP servers are like they take a lot of tokens. There's like a lot of stuff between them. So it's like, I started to learn like, use API access versus MCPs because it won't eat up your tokens as well. And then there's some utilities that actually will even kind of take the command line and kind of sit in front of it and all that. And again, you don't have to do anything. You just say use this version and it will really condense how much text the commands are spitting out, which really give you a way to like manage your tokens. So people are like, if you haven't done it, you're like, this is crazy. I would never do all this. Let me tell you this. If you get into it and you start to go through your tokens, you're like, hold on, I got to look at my token management a little bit.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had started to dive into that. I've been reading about that lately, about some of these things that are just sort of like, yeah, they're filters that sort of sit between, your prompt and the LLM, and it's like, no, we don't need your, take it, it's the equivalent of like deduplication on like a hard drive or something like that.
Yeah, no, pretty much. Again, hopefully this is just a point in time. Like one day we'll laugh at like, oh my God, I can't believe it. We were so worried about tokens. We had to cut down on the text. But right now, it's super important. Now I have started to play a little bit. This is a topic maybe you can get Sally back on talk about. But OpenClaw popularized this idea of like remote access. The idea that you can like go back and text it via Telegram. That's just came out with Claude. So I haven't done that as much as well. But I have done /remote. So you start a session, and then like how addicting it can be. Like in my case, I have to like go to my son's soccer practice, whatever. So I'll just start remote, and then it gives you basically a URL, and then you can just continue on. You can have on your phone, just like be wherever you want. So that's another like little, just like a little hack. And then there's just an endless amount of commands inside of Claude. I feel like I discover one every day. There's one, I can't remember, I think it was analytics. At some point, it'll almost tell you like how you're using Claude, which is super meta. It'll tell you like,
I heard about that.
Which is a fun one as well. So then that gives you, and then of course, what do you do with that input? You give it back to Claude and be like, well, what do you think? What else should be doing? So it's like these cycles of productivity just kind of go on and on.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've found. I've been digging into more and more is the thing where you kind of ask it like, okay, let's say you wrote something for work and you were like, okay, like who would be the audience for this thing? And you're like, all right, well, if the, like you'd be like, okay, cool. Well, suppose you are my boss. What would you think of this thing? Or suppose you're presenting to an audience of a bunch of people and maybe it's a mixed, batch of like some business people and some technical people or whatever. It'd be like, okay, cool. Give it to me from this perspective. Okay, now give it to me from this perspective. How would you go about? And just the ability to sort of like A/B test stuff and to have it take a different perspective than you would normally do is, again, one of those things you're like, yeah, this is no longer searching. This is no longer just like chatting with something. This is like, yeah, I got a whole bunch of experts just inside the box, and I just got to know how to like unlock them or how to, ask it to do some things. And
I think a real tangible example let's just give like simple examples. Like, hey, put your resume, put some of your work documents in, give it your LinkedIn, and be like, if you're in a position in life where you're looking for another job, I mean, you have a career coach right there. Have it read everything, and you can have it be like, you can have it be very nice to you and be like, how can I like maybe, hey, I just want you to touch up my resume, some basic stuff,
right?
Or you can have it like pretty. I've done like role play. It's like you could do kind of like pretend you're interviewing me for the job that you want, right? What questions would likely be asked, and then you can sit there and like answer them, and it could be. I mean, it's like, be careful what you ask for, but it'll tell you like this wasn't good or this you lead with this, and then you kind of get to the point of like just to kind of show sometimes how these expand. It's like, well, then at first you'll be like, well, I should update my resume based on some of the things that they said. That makes total sense, right? But then you're like, wait a minute, why don't I have Claude go through the whole thing and rewrite it in a way, because resumes are a great example of where oftentimes people like some people don't want to like brag. They don't want to take credit for everything. It's like you'll see something like, I worked on a team that did this, but like the hiring manager wants to see like, I led the team.
You lead this?
And I did everything, right? So, you don't have to accept all that, but you can have it go through almost as like someone, like, I don't know, like a coach pumping you up. It's like, don't just say you were on the team, say you led this, or don't say you led this, but like say the thing that you specifically did. And it's like, that kind of stuff is like, again, like everyone's probably looking for jobs now, or some people are. It's like very helpful. And again, you do that on Claude Code inside a terminal, it'll start to make the edits and you go back and forth with it, right? So it's so much more powerful than just like being on a chat bot and just kind of having it talk about the stuff versus like it's in there doing it with you.
Well, and the other thing I found is like, for that kind of stuff where you're like, okay, I showed this to somebody, I presented it to somebody, and they gave you a set of feedback. In the old days, yesterday, you'd be like, okay, cool. Well, let's schedule another meeting. I'll take your feedback. I'll go work on it. Like you literally can work on it like right then. Like, so you might have presented in the first 15 minutes of your meeting. You got done. You took a bunch of feedback. You're like, all right, I'm going to work on this like right now and be like, okay, I know we don't need more time in the meeting, but I want to give it to you like right now. I want you to see where we took your feedback. Here's where it's different. This unlocked something. So, I mean, just the timing of it to be able to be like, you want it in that voice. You want it in that tone. You want it more enthusiastic. You want it more direct, whatever. Those are such simple things that would have taken days and days and days to do. And then you would have second thought, you'd second guess yourself and that guy's an asshole and I shouldn't have done this. Yeah. I mean, not taking advantage of that is pretty.
And I think just what you're saying there is like oftentimes like in those meetings, I think we've all been in there. I was having some flashbacks as you're telling your story. And it's like a lot of times what happens is like the person maybe giving the feedback doesn't actually know what they really want.
Yeah.
So this is why it's like, but the quicker you can like iterate through, because what normally needs to happen is, and this would take like a month, it's like we need it more this, we need it more happy, we need it more sad, whatever, right? But then if you close that iteration cycle faster, they're more likely to be like, I've seen 3 versions of this in the last hour. It's actually, you know what, we're doing the wrong thing. We should be, I want to do something completely different. Versus what would have taken like a month could take like a couple hours. And again, like I'm not picking on anyone because I've been in the same thing. Sometimes like, you ask me and I don't know what I want either. And I'm sort of like, but no one really says that. But like that loop of like, oh, okay, we went through the happy, the sad, the medium, and then we learned that we're really doing the wrong thing. Let's try something new, which is super valuable.
I'm going to wrap it up with this one because we've been going for a little bit and people are probably a little tired of us telling stories. Hopefully this stuff's been useful. Again, we're going to, I think we want to try and highlight where people are doing stuff. Like what's the experience you're getting? Because I think the experience, it's amazing to me. You can go from person to person and be like, okay, how much are you doing this? And they're like, some. And you'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, yeah, I'm doing it more than I was before. And the gap between those two people is just like, oh my gosh, like you don't always realize it unless you hear it talked out. Have you had that moment yet where you're working on something and it's something that like you do at work regularly or you used to do at work regularly and you do it now, you're doing it through Claude, it's getting better, you're feeling good about it, you're looking at how long it took, and, you're kind of like, that's amazing. And then you think like, if I was doing this with a group of people again, like I would be so frustrated with the rest of the people if they weren't doing it at the same speed or using the same tools as me. Like, have you had that moment yet where you're like, I don't know that I can work in a room with other people who are like, have one arm tied behind their back because they're not taking advantage of what this thing can do.
I think I've had that feeling pretty frequently. And so, just a day to day, and especially in the circles that because I think everyone's at a different place. And I was there too. Like I sort of was kind of slow, or I didn't adopt it as quick as I wanted.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was at lunch with somebody and I was telling them what was going on. And, I felt like I was like, I don't know. I just kind of became this Claude evangelist, right? And but like what I was finding is like, and it kind of goes back to like so much what we talk about is like the human mind tries to reject all new ideas. It doesn't want to, because we know from evolution wants to protect itself, right? It doesn't want to be bombarded. So most of it is like we have a lot of filtering mechanisms in place to like so we can keep our sanity, right? And this person was doing the whole thing was like, I'm not a developer. You tech people, you're always talking about this. And he's a tech person, but he's like, I don't want to do the command line, or my company doesn't let the security stuff. And it's like, so to where you're getting at is like, if you haven't done this at all, like you are putting yourself at such a disadvantage. Like I'm not even telling you have to like it. Like, that it's going to work for you. I think it will. I mean, let me say that out, directly, but I think, to your point, like everyone needs to be like downloading one of these agents. We talked a lot about Claude, but if you want to use the other ones, that's, they'll get you going, right? But like you need to like experience to know like what you're missing, right? And to know what other people are coming into the room with. Now you may decide it doesn't work for you, but you do. So to your point, like about like I think just working in white collar America for a while, like you definitely need to have these jobs. And also too, I think there's a tremendous opportunity. Those of us that sort of like grab onto it, there's going to be this period of time of adoption where you're going to look like, and I hate this word, I hate this idea of the 10X employee. Like I am the first to say that doesn't exist. But like, it's like I was telling my son or something, it's like, I feel like sometimes like I just have like it's like an alien, the exoskeleton. Like I've walked in, like you're just a human being walking around and I'm walking around in this giant armor suit where I can lift boulders, right? It's just so powerful. And I think it's really important to everybody, like at least go experience that. For what you want. And like, who knows? Is there an AI bubble? I almost feel like that's a separate discussion at this point. It's like, I don't know how much people are spending on data centers. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but I do know no one's going back. Once you kind of touch this, there's a group of people that are never going to work the same. And it's, again, you have your mission. Go out, and if you haven't done it, go out, start something, try it out. And if you don't like it, email Brian at The Reasoning Show and tell him why he's wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm always fascinated by like the stories that I hear from folks. And I'm, to a certain extent, like intimidated by, you read some of these stories of people be like, yeah, I've got 17 agents going and they're doing this stuff. And I'm kind of like, like on one hand, you're like, okay, that's like how you would run a business, or that's how you would, project management, something. But then, the fact that it's like you can now sort of put that in your hands. And yes, there's probably going to be some amount of learning curve, and some people are going to figure out how to do it more efficiently because they're a better software programmer than you. And maybe you're like, I don't do any software programming, but like, yeah, I keep coming back to the fact. And it's a weird thing because I'm always like, God, the guy who tells me that I got to like, get up at 4 a.m. and sit in a cold plunge and meditate and all that. I'm always like, God, I just don't want to hear from you. But like this stuff, especially in the day and age we work in, is just, it is somewhat of a superpower if you can kind of harness it. And you kind of wonder if you're like, well, maybe I should just kind of keep this to myself for a while. It does feel like something that the ones who get it, again, not trying to make comparisons, but like it is a pretty wild thing when you start being like, oh, it's not a sideshow anymore. It's the center of what I do.
And I thought, just to like, as we end here, I thought that interview with Sally in OpenClaw, like if you go back, like where the hype around OpenClaw is really just another proxy for this. Like people have discovered all these ways to do stuff, and they're excited because of just the productivity gains that they're personally experienced. And I think, I just want to go back to what you said before. It's like, I want no one to think like, I'm not telling you to do Pilates once a week. I'm not telling you to like do cold plunges. All I'm saying is like, just open up this console and just, you tell it what you want to do. Like, that's what you should do. And I think you'll be amazed. Like, so it's not so much like it's a quick fix. It's more like just start telling it what you want to do. And you will probably be very impressed with the time that you will save in your life and the output that you'll be able to do. And that's not like prescribed. That's just like, just go start typing stuff in. Don't follow any specific pattern. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, you may start just finding yourself, you're playing more golf, or you're doing more stuff with your hobbies, or you're watching more TV shows because you're working
any of those
3 hours instead
all
of 8.
Of those are great examples.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. So, all right, man. Well, as always, thank you for coming on. Thanks for being a non-AI and Cloud News of the Month guest, for giving us your experience. We appreciate it. As always, folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for giving us feedback on the evolution of the show. And with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you next week.
Check us out online at reasoning.show for all things reasoning. And leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show.